The Arizona sunset burned the sky with deep reds and fading copper. Stretching long shadows over the cliff's edge, the wind cut sharp across the rocky rim, carrying with it the hushed murmurs of men who had already decided her fate. Clara Holt stood at the precipice not by choice, but by force. Her wrists were bound tightly with coarse rope, and a foul-smelling sack covered her head, reeking of mildew and rotted vegetables. Each tremble tightened the rope's bite against her skin, but it was the stillness, the cruel quiet, that hurt worse than anything. Behind her, voices moved like poison in the air. "High enough," someone muttered. Mayor Vernon answered with a drunken chill in his voice. "She ain't climbing back up." Then came the voice that stabbed deepest, her stepfather, Amos. "She disgraced our name," spat in the mayor's face. "Now she pays." Clara's lips were chapped, her eyes hidden in darkness behind the sack, but her ears caught every sound. Boots scraping frost, breathing thick with menace. "Do it." The mayor snapped, and they did. The ground vanished, wind screamed. Around her, for one endless moment, she was weightless, then pain. Branches lashed her skin, rocks ripped through her thin dress, and her fall ended violently on a snowy ledge. Bones cracked, blood soaked the snow. She didn't die, but she was supposed to. Half buried in the cold, Clara slipped in and out of consciousness, her ribs searing with each breath. The air smelled of pine and iron. Time became meaningless. Then came the sound of hooves. Not frantic, measured, calm. A figure appeared above her, blurry and towering. She couldn't lift her head, but she felt the warmth that radiated from him. Solid and real. A hand pressed gently to her shoulder, then to her neck. "You still breathe," a voice said, low and certain. He moved slowly, without fear, wrapped her in a cloak lined with fur, lifted her broken body onto a horse that stepped with the pace of a long journey. Then all went dark again. When Clara woke next, she was wrapped in furs beside a fire. Smoke from cedarwood drifted through the lodge, mixing with the scent of medicine. Hides lined the walls, thick rugs muffled sound. Pain clung to her, dull now, but constant. Across the fire sat the man. He didn't speak or approach. Instead, he placed a small wooden cup beside her, steam curling from its surface. Clara found her voice in the dim light. "Why didn't you take off the sack?" His eyes met hers, calm, unreadable. "I don't take what someone isn't ready to give." She clenched the blanket, trembling. "You saw them throw me away." "I saw someone left to die," he answered simply. That was enough. His stillness disturbed her more than rage would have. He didn't pity her. He simply acknowledged her. "What's your name?" she asked. "Silver Wolf." He didn't ask for hers. After a long pause, he added, "You don't have one anymore. That means you get to choose when the time's right." She looked down at the tea, steam dancing above it like ghosts from a past life. She sipped carefully. Her hands shook, but she drank it. For the first time since the fall, something inside her stirred. Not fear, not pain. Something like hope. Outside, tall pines held onto snow like forgotten memories. Shadows stretched beneath a bruised sky. But inside the lodge, amber light flickered across the walls. Clara, no longer shivering, lay still. The sack was still on. Her face, but her hands now free, rested beneath the wool blanket. Her breaths hurt, but they were proof of life. Someone had made sure of that. She didn't hear him come in again. He moved like mist, but she felt it. Silver Wolf, quiet, steady, not a man who demanded, only waited. He had carried her here, given her time, asked nothing, just been there. Slowly, Clara's fingers found the edge of the sack. She pulled it off. Light met her first, then color, the flickering orange of the fire, the fur-lined walls. A bowl of water rested nearby, rippling slightly. She leaned over and saw herself. Bruise is marking her face, lips raw, hair tangled beyond recognition, but the eyes staring back were still. Hers. Beside the bowl lay a simple wooden comb, smooth, its handle carved with a feather. It hadn't been placed there as a command or even a gift, just a silent invitation. Next to it, a pair of worn leather gloves, small and stitched with red thread. A woman's gloves. Clara touched them lightly. They weren't just tools or tokens. They meant something. "You're welcome here." Her throat tightened. She hadn't felt that in a long time. She picked up the comb and dragged it through her hair. It hurt every tug a small battle, but she kept going. Each knot undone whispered, a quiet truth. I'm still here. The flap lifted. Silver Wolf returned, carrying a pot. He set it by the fire, nodded once to the gloves and bowl, then sat. This time, she really saw him. He wasn't much older than 30. His features were strong, composed. He didn't speak much, but his presence filled the lodge. He didn't have to speak. He was the silence. Then the moment shifted again. New footsteps. A woman entered, older, wrapped in a thick shawl. Her face told of hard winters and harder truths. She carried a basket of eggs and a look of caution. But Clara didn't flinch. Not this time. ***. Silver Wolf, the woman said, her voice flat and cold, eyes narrowing as they landed on Clara. The basket in her hands shifted, and her breath hitched. My God, she whispered. Is that? She looks just like, the mayor said. She died. Clara tensed. She is my guest, Silver Wolf said with quiet firmness, his gaze unmoved. If you came to bring food, leave it. If you came to judge, take it elsewhere. The woman lingered, lips pressed in a hard line. People will talk. They always do, without another word. She placed the basket by the fire and left. Clara stared at the floor, hands clenching beneath the blanket. They'll come, she murmured. They'll find me. They'll drag me back. Silver Wolf knelt by the fire, nudging a coal with a twig. Not unless you want them to, she turned to him. The flames flickered in his eyes, calm, sure. For the first time since she'd been thrown from the cliff, she believed him. Outside, snow sifted silently down, cloaking the pines in pale breath. Inside, the fire burned low, throwing amber light across the small space that had become her world. She hadn't spoken in 3 days. In that silence, she watched Silver Wolf. He moved with quiet purpose, splitting wood, boiling water, drying meat. Every morning, without fail, he left a fresh piece of cornbread beside her. He asked nothing, said little, just worked. He fixed the broken lean-to, mended the creekside fence, hands steady and movements patient. From her bed at first, then from the doorway, Clara watched. Her bruises were fading, the pain in her ribs easing. She still moved slow, but her eyes followed everything he did. In those small, wordless moments, something began to shift inside her. She started to feel safe. On the third night, with darkness folding in around the trees, she sat by the fire across from him. Her hair was damp from washing. She still didn't know how to speak the storm inside her. But the silence between them no longer scared her. It felt like it belonged to both of them now. She studied him, the strength in his shoulders, the way the fire softened the hard lines of his face, and the grief that lived in his eyes like a shadow that had never left. Do you live out here alone? She asked. Her voice was hoarse, scratchy from disuse. He stared into the flames a long while before answering. People leave me alone, he said. That's how I prefer it. But there was something buried in those words, something heavier than choice. Clara didn't press. She understood. Sometimes being alone wasn't about freedom. Sometimes it was just what was left. She nodded. He nodded back. Later, when she returned to her blanket, something waited for her. A folded square of linen, a bottle of ink, and a wooden pen. No note, no instructions, just an offering. Write what sets you free. Her fingers trembled as she touched them. She hadn't written since the day before the cliff. Her voice, her name, her will, they had been taken from her. But this quiet gift stirred something long buried. That night, she lit a stub of candle and spread the cloth in her lap. The pen felt strange in her hand. But slowly the words came. She wrote everything, the truth about Vernon, about Amos, about what they had done. And then she wrote something else. She was not ruined, not invisible, not a husk to be thrown away. She was still here. She ended with her name, not as an ending, but as a start. At dawn, she didn't reach for her brush. Instead, she took Silver Wolf's hunting knife and walked to the creek. The rising light caught the blade as she pulled her hair forward. One motion. The curls fell like dead skin. She looked at her reflection in the water. Uneven hair, pale face, steady eyes. The girl in the white dress was gone. Back in the lodge, she hesitated at the door. Her chest ached with cold and uncertainty. Silver Wolf looked up from the fire. He said nothing, just gave her a single nod, slow and certain, as if he'd always seen the strength she was only now beginning to uncover. And Clara, still without a new name, but no longer invisible, felt something stir deep in her chest, a small, quiet fire. She had not vanished, she had endured, and what came next was hers to choose. The fire crackled gently as dusk settled around the pines. Outside, melting snow whispered down the stone walls, the dripping like faint echoes from another world. Clara sat cross-legged near the hearth, shawl draped round her shoulders, fingertips grazing the edge of the linen she had written on. Her heart was lighter, but silence still hung between her and the man who had saved her. Silver Wolf sat across from her, slowly sharpening a knife. Firelight danced on his skin, casting deep shadows under his eyes. He was still but not peaceful. His stillness was the kind that followed loss. She spoke first. "Have you always lived here?" He didn't answer right away. The rasp of steel against stone slowed, then stopped. "No," he said at last. He set the knife down. "Not always." He looked into the flames. "I was taken when I was 9, sent to a mission school near Tucson. They cut my hair, burned my clothes, gave me a Bible and a name that wasn't mine, Joseph." Clara swallowed. "I stopped speaking my language, not because I forgot, because no one would listen." He nudged a coal into place, eyes heavy with memory. "I ran away after 3 years, took a winter to find my way back. But I did." He paused, jaw tight. "I married. We had a son. He was wild, fast as the wind." His voice faded, but the ache in it remained. ***. The voices had faded before the coughing began, first hers, then his. They were both gone before the moon had turned twice in the sky. Since then, he hadn't looked at her. "I've been caught between places ever since," Clara said quietly. "Not from the village, not from the town, just here." Her breath caught not from sorrow, but from something deeper, recognition. His story wasn't hers, but it moved alongside it, to paths shaped by loss and left to walk alone. "My stepfather sold me," she said softly, not looking at him, "to pay off a debt." Silverwolf said nothing, only listened. "I said no. I told them I'd rather die." Her voice cracked, "So they made sure I did." He reached behind him without a word and unwrapped a small bundle of buckskin. Inside lay a knife not large, but carefully crafted, its handle carved with the image of a howling wolf. He offered it to her. "Take it," he said. She hesitated. "It's not for killing," he added. "It's to remind you you're not prey anymore. You're the hunter." Her fingers curled around the hilt. The blade was cold. The gesture was warmer than anything words could offer. "Thank you," she whispered. Before he could respond, a whistle sliced through the quiet woods outside. Silverwolf stood instantly, every sense sharp. A moment later, the lodge flap was pushed aside, and a young man stepped inside, tall and lean, paint streaked across his jaw, eyes lit with fury. Iron Arrow. His expression twisted when he saw her. "You brought her here," he snapped in their native tongue. "A white girl? You think the tribe won't notice?" Silverwolf stood his ground. "She was left to die. I found her." Iron Arrow stepped forward, his voice hard. "She'll bring trouble. You know how it goes. They bring disease, soldiers, lies. She brings truth." Silverwolf said evenly. "She brings danger." Clara stood, the knife at her side not raised, just present. "I didn't ask to be saved," she said clearly, "but I won't apologize for surviving." Iron Arrow looked between them, spat on the dirt, and vanished into the trees. The silence that followed was heavier than a storm. "They'll come for me," Clara said. "Eventually, even here. Then we meet them on our feet," Silverwolf replied. Her breath caught again, this time from surprise. "You'd go with me, to town?" He nodded. "You carry the truth. Someone must stand beside it." She looked at the knife again. For the first time, she didn't see the broken girl who'd been thrown from a cliff. She saw someone willing to rise. Birch Hollow looked the same, its streets still lined with dust and soot. Its people still leaned from porches with narrow eyes and loud mouths. But the air had shifted the morning. Clara Halt returned. She didn't hide beneath a cloak. She didn't follow behind. She walked beside Silverwolf, wearing a sun-bleached yellow dress she'd repaired with her own hands. Every stitch held defiance. Every step echoed with a ghost's refusal to stay buried. As they passed the general store and the livery, voices whispered. Behind shutters, "That's her. She's supposed to be dead." "No, that's Clara Halt." Silverwolf moved with her, solid and quiet. He carried no weapon, but his presence alone cleared a path. By the time they reached the town square, a half-circle had formed, curious, wary, some hostile. The mayor's office loomed ahead, smug and shuttered. Then its doors flew open. Vernon strode out, sweat slick under his collar, disbelief stiffening into a sneer. Well, well," he said, stepping down. "Look what came crawling out of the grave." He paced toward them, boots hitting wood to loud. "Clara Halt, you really are a ghost. Thought the coyotes left nothing but bones." She didn't flinch. "You're not welcome here," he said. "You belong to me. We had a deal. The church was ready. You ran. You fell. That's on you." "I didn't fall," she replied calmly. "I was pushed." A murmur rolled through the crowd. "You're confused," Vernon snapped. "Grief does that. I'm the law. And the law says you were promised." "There's no law," Clara said, her voice hard. "Just your money and a rope tied around my wrists." Gasps rippled. A chair scraped behind them. Then a new voice. "I saw the marks," said Mrs. Godwin, stepping forward. Her apron dusted with pollen. "Rope burns, fresh and deep. No one ties themselves like that." "That's just speculation," Vernon growled. Another man stepped through. The crowd, Reverend Carter, his hands folded over a Bible. "There was never a contract filed with the church," he said. "No wedding, no public reading, no marriage." Vernon's face reddened. "You all forget who runs this town." "No," someone murmured. "Maybe we remember too well." Clara stepped forward. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled a folded linen square from her shawl. "I wrote this for myself," she said. "But now, I think you need to hear it." She unfolded it and began to read. "I am Clara Halt. I was sold, bound, and thrown from a cliff because I said no. I was told I was property. I was told silence would keep me alive. But I lived anyway, and I won't be silent." The silence that followed roared louder than any shout. Even Vernon hesitated, his mouth opening and closing. Mrs. Godwin crossed her arms. "You've said enough, Vernon. Maybe now it's your turn to listen." A man from the back added, "We're not cattle. We choose who we are." Clara looked around. Faces that once ignored her now met her eyes. Silverwolf rested, a hand lightly on her shoulder. No words, just presence. And in that presence, Clara realized she was no longer alone, that not in identity, not in truth, not in the eyes of those who finally saw her. By the time they reached the lodge again, patches of snow had melted, revealing the damp, living earth beneath. The path behind them was still. Clara's steps didn't falter. Her yellow dress was wrinkled. Her hands were dusty, but her eyes were steady. Silverwolf knelt by the hearth, feeding kindling to the ash, coaxing flame from memory. The voices had long since quieted before the coughing began. Hers first, then his. They both slipped away before the moon could make its second full pass. From that moment, he hadn't looked at her once. "I've been stuck in between ever since," Clara said in a low voice. "Not part of the village, not part of the town, just here." Her breath hitched not with sorrow, but with something deeper, a recognition. His story wasn't the same as hers, but it echoed beside it, shaped by different losses. Walking the same lonely road. "My stepfather sold me," she said, not meeting his eyes, "to clear his debt." Silverwolf remained silent, listening. Without judgment, "I said no. I told them I'd rather die than be taken." Her voice broke. "So they made sure I did." He reached behind him, quietly unwrapping a bundle of soft buckskin. Inside was a small knife, modest in size but carefully made. Its wooden handle bore the carving of a wolf mid-howl. He held it out to her. "For you," he said. She hesitated, uncertain. "It's not meant to kill," he added. "It's to remind you you're no one's prey. You're the one who hunts." Now, her fingers curled around the grip. The blade was cold, but the meaning behind it carried warmth no words could match. "Thank you," she whispered. Before he could answer, a sharp whistle broke the quiet beyond the lodge. Silverwolf was on his feet in an instant, alert and still. The door flap lifted. A tall young man stepped inside, his jaw painted with streaks of color, anger blazing in his eyes iron arrow. His gaze landed on Clara, and his expression darkened. "You brought her here," he said in their native tongue, voice sharp. "A white girl. You think the others won't notice. She was left to die," Silverwolf replied calmly. "I chose not to leave her. She'll bring ruin." Iron Arrow snapped. "You know how it ends. Illness, soldiers, broken promises. She brings honesty," Silverwolf said, unmoved. "She brings trouble." Clara rose to her feet, the knife at her side not raised, but seen. "I didn't ask to be saved," she said, voice firm, "but I won't apologize for staying alive." Iron Arrow's glare shifted between them. He spat onto the earth and turned, disappearing into the trees. The silence that followed was thick with tension. "They'll come looking," Clara said. "They always do, even here." "Then we face them standing," Silverwolf said. She stared at him, startled. "You'd come with me? To town?" He nodded. "You hold the truth. Someone must stand beside it." She looked at the blade in her hand, and for the first time, she didn't see the shattered girl left to die. She saw someone rising. Birch Hollow hadn't changed. The roads were still coated in dust, the buildings worn and watchful. Faces leaned from porches. Their eyes narrowed, voices low. But something in the air had shifted when Clara Halt returned. She didn't hide. She didn't trail behind. She walked at Silverwolf's side, her sun-washed yellow dress mended with stitches made by her own hand. Every thread carried defiance. Every step echoed a refusal to stay forgotten. As they passed the familiar buildings, the general store, the livery whispers crept from behind curtains. "That's her. She was supposed to be dead." "No, that's Clara Halt." Silverwolf moved silently beside her, unarmed, but his presence parted the crowd as though he carried a blade. By the time they reached the town square, a loose crowd had gathered, some curious, some hostile. The mayor's office stood across. From them, its doors shut tight, the building looming dot on the doors burst open. Vernon stepped out, sweat glistening beneath his collar, disbelief hardening into mockery. Well, well," he said, descending the steps. "Look what climbed out of the grave." He strutted forward, each bootstep like a slap against wood. Clara Halt, still breathing. "I figured the coyotes had finished you." She didn't flinch. "You don't belong here," he snarled. "You're mine. We made an agreement. The church was ready. You ran off, fell off a cliff. That was your doing. I didn't fall." Clara said calmly. "I was pushed." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "You're mistaken." Vernon snapped. "Grief makes people see things. I am the law here, and the law said you were promised." "There was no law," she said sharply. "Just your money and a rope around my wrists." Gasps echoed around them, a chair scraped. Then a voice from the crowd. "I saw the burns," Mrs. Godwin said, stepping forward. Her apron was streaked with yellow pollen, rope marks, fresh and deep. "You don't tie yourself like that." "That's hearsay," Vernon said, his face darkening. Then Reverend Carter stepped out, his Bible cradled in both hands. "There was no record in the church books," he said quietly. "No ceremony, no agreement, no wedding." Color rose to Vernon's cheeks. "Do you all forget who built this place, who keeps it running?" "No." Someone said from the crowd. "Maybe we remember too clearly." Clara stepped forward, her hands shaking slightly as she drew out a folded cloth from her shawl. "I wrote this to remind myself," she said, "but maybe it's time you heard it too." She unfolded it and read, "I am Clara Halt. I was sold, bound, and thrown from a cliff for saying no. I was told I belonged to someone else, that silence was the only way to stay alive. But I lived, and I will not be silent." The quiet afterward was deeper than any storm. Vernon tried to speak but faltered. His mouth moved, but no words came. Mrs. Godwin folded her arms. "You've done enough talking, Vernon. It's time someone else had the floor." From the back, another voice rose. "We're not livestock. We decide who we are." Clara turned, seeing eyes that once looked away now meet hers. Silverwolf's hand rested on her shoulder, not guiding, just their dot, and for the first time, she felt truly seen. They returned to the lodge as afternoon light faded. Snow had melted in patches. exposing dark, damp earth beneath. The trail behind them lay undisturbed. Clara didn't stumble. Her yellow dress was creased, her hands still dusted with the road, but her gaze was clear. Silverwolf crouched by the hearth, adding twigs to the ash, coaxing new fire from the memory of old flame. They called her Cliff's Dawn, and she accepted it with a steady voice. Because I rose where I was meant to vanish, the elders gave quiet nods. The shaman smiled and scattered cornmeal into the fire. Sparks leapt up like stars beside her. Silverwolf said nothing, but when the fire dwindled and people drifted away, he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and led her to a modest lodge at the far edge of the camp. It was simple poles wrapped in buffalo hide, smoke rising from a small chimney. "This is yours," he said softly, "your beginning, inside." The lodge was humble yet warm. Woven mats lined the ground. A small fire glowed in the pit. A folded blanket, a wooden bowl, and a bundle of herbs waited at the back. It was more than she had ever been given in her life. When she turned, he was kneeling just outside, a carving knife in one hand and a piece of charred wood in the other. With slow, deliberate movements, he carved into the doorway's frame a shape of an eagle, soaring. She stepped close. "What does it mean?" she asked. He looked up, his eyes locking with hers. "It's your guardian," he said. "It watches from above, and now it watches over this place." He stood, brushed dust from his hands. "This is your home." Cliff's Dawn, her throat tightened. She reached out and touched the carving, its edges still warm from the blade. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, she joined the women by the fire. They showed her how to press cornmeal into hot stones, forming cakes. Their hands moved with practiced speed. Their smiles were cautious, but less so than before. One handed her a cloth to knead with. Another adjusted her grip. No one said welcome, but they didn't have to. She was being folded into something older than language. That she woke with the sun, gathered roots, rinsed them in the cold river, and learned to weave beside the younger girls. Her hands fumbled at first, but she stayed patient. Every evening, Silverwolf would sit with her beside the lodge and teach her their words: sky, wind, earth, heart. He didn't correct, he remembered aloud. And she didn't study, she listened, as though hearing a language her bones had always known. Days slipped into weeks. One morning, birdsong and the scent of baking bread pulled her from sleep, and for the first time, she wasn't holding her breath against the fear of loss. No one could take this. It had been made by her hands, shaped by her will. It belonged to her. As seasons turned in the Apache Valley, so did she. Spring thawed the final snow, flowers opened, bees hummed through the fields. Clara, now fully Cliff's Dawn, moved through the camp with woven braids, herbs tied at her hip, and a gentle steadiness that echoed wherever she walked. She was no longer the broken girl who had been pushed from the cliff's edge. She had become the woman who rose. She and Silverwolf built a home beside the creek, where water rushed over, stones like a song. Their lives were woven together like the patterns she now stitched into blankets Apache dyes. Blending with her careful hands, old wisdom meeting fresh breath, she became the healer, the one who mixed what Mrs. Godwin had once taught her with the sacred knowledge Silverwolf's people had trusted for generations: sage for sorrow, willow bark for fever, honey for wounds no words could name. One evening, as golden firelight stretched across the canyon, Silverwolf brought her a thick, richly patterned blanket. Reds, blues, and deep browns shimmered in its center. The edges were worn. "My mother made this," he said. "She gave it to me when I became a man. I've carried it ever since." He stepped forward and, in a voice filled with quiet certainty, said, "You are Cliff's Dawn, but to me, you are the light of the entire sky." He wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. She closed her eyes, breath catching as the warmth settled into her bones like belonging. They were married beneath the full moon. No priest, no documents, only fire, voices, and truth. She stood wrapped in the blanket, her hands in Silverwolf's, and spoke her name, Cliff's Dawn, aloud once more, in the Apache tongue. It sounded like she had always carried it. Children danced, elders smiled. Even Iron Arrows, who had once doubted her, gave a small, real smile. News reached Birch Hollow in slow, winding ways, like smoke through cracks. The story traveled from house to house. Reverend Carter and Mrs. Godwin told it carefully, the tale of the girl who had returned from the edge of death not to seek vengeance, but to build something greater. People listened. Some even came, not many, but enough. Years later, Clara stood again at the cliff where they had once tried to erase her. Snow swirled around her like soft feathers. The land stretched far and free below. She wore an eagle feather at her neck, the old blanket around her shoulders. Silverwolf stood beside her. "I used to think this cliff would be the last thing I saw," she said. He turned, his voice soft. "Now it's the place where you began." She nodded, her breath forming clouds in the winter air. They stood together, hand in hand, eyes on the horizon. She hadn't just survived. She had been reborn. What they tried to destroy rose stronger than anything they had built, stronger than rules or shame or the men who thought they could break her. Clara had become Cliff's Dawn, not just a new name, but a fire in her chest. She found healing in hands once unfamiliar, found family where no one had spoken her name before. She stood on the stone they had left her to die upon, not as a ghost, not as a victim, but as a woman who rewrote her fate with her own hands. And if something in this story stirred your heart, if you to believe that love can grow from wreckage, that names can be claimed like sacred ground, then ride with us. Join Wild West Love Stories, where every tale is drawn from dust and pain and always ends in the light. Because out here, not all the bullets miss, but sometimes the hearts don't either.